How hard can it be to decide which bunch of cards for a shitty Japanese card game for children and adolescents end up, mind you, to review? On one hand you got the painty boys, and on the other side you got the darkly guys, but one's too boring to talk about and the other's too good and boring to talk about. Like, there's like 30 million of them and I haven't covered. How hard can it be to think, to come up with an answer to the question, the next Archetype archive is what? The next Archetype archive is what? The next Archetype archive is what? Whenever I'm supposed to talk about an archetype from the late GX through 5Ds era, I'm usually forced to bring up the concept of gimmicks. No, not those, I already talked about those, they're bad. What I'm referring to is Konami's idea to approach archetype design in a way that's a lot less homogeneous and that made each individual archetype stand out in some specific way, and while it did result in a lot of fan favorites such as Lightsworn and Gladiator Beasts, some archetypes were based on gimmicks inherently worse than others and were a lot more prone to being buried under the soil of power creep, which is very evident with Watts. Their focus on the battle phase rendered them a lot more viable during slower formats in which monster swarming and excessive effect negation wasn't too much of a problem, and nowadays it's a wonder if they even make it into the battle phase. Before I start the analysis, well, more like a roast really, these guys did not fare too well with the passage of time. I just want to point out that this video won't be covering any monsters that don't look like Gen 4 Pokemon rejects, mainly because the rest of the Watt crew has nothing to do with this archetype. So let us start off with one of the monsters that made Watt stand out among most other archetypes during their early lifetime in the meta of the game, Watt Hopper, a level 1 Thunder type with 0 attack and defense, and his effect is that your opponent cannot target another face-up Watt monster for attacks or effects. Listen, this was kind of a big deal in 2010. Controlling 2 Watt Hoppers, which certainly wasn't impossible given that the archetype has some searching capability, meant that your opponent either had to apply non-targeting removal or use a lava golem to get over 2 pathetic tiny bugs in order to even attack, both of which were not common practice during the middle of the Synchro era. Even today, the Watt Hopper lock is known to cause occasional problems to archetypes without access to non-targeting removal, but it's undoubtedly a lot easier to get over. Regardless, with as much level 1 monster searching as humanly possible, Hopper Watts can be a pretty funky deck to experiment with and piss people off. But I know you're not here to listen to the good stuff, you wanna see blood, so here's Watt Beta. It wasn't good enough so we never saw Watt Omega. It's a level 2 tuner with 100 attack and 0 defense, and when it inflicts battle damage with a direct attack, your opponent discards 1 card of their choice. Oh snap, dunkheads, get out of the way, Watt Beta busting through! Seeing how the effect is horribly outdated, being a level 2 tuner is pretty much its only redeeming quality. If you have nothing better to run, use one of these for the sake of accessing one of their synchros. Their other level 2 tuner is Watt Fox, a name which coincidentally sounds like an Australian inquiring about your sex life. It's got 800 attack and 100 defense, and when it's destroyed by your opponent's card, be it battle or card effect, your opponent cannot special summon a monster or activate spells, traps or card effects for the rest of this turn. Too little too late, Foxy. This is actually a really strong disabling effect, but the fact that its activation condition is so specific renders it a lot less impressive. Overall, I'd call it a better choice for level 2 tuner, mainly because you could get some use out of its effect once every 274 duels, but moreover I would call your deck building skills questionable if you're playing Watts in the first place. Watt Lemur is their next level 2, it also has 800 attack and 100 defense, and if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by your opponent's card, by battle or card effect, your opponent cannot conduct their battle phase during their next turn. It's an interesting little critter you can summon at the end of the chain of Watt Dragonflies, which is a card we will talk about soon, and while it's not gonna bother anyone too much in this day and age, seeing how most of the removal happens outside of the battle phase, it's a funky little tech you can use against your 7-year-old brother. Or just pilot full power dragon rulers and show him the real man's world. Their last level 2 is Watt Dragonfly. They're really stretching it with these names at this point, and we're only 5 cards in. It has 900 attack and 100 defense, and if this card is destroyed by your opponent's card, again by battle or card effect, you can special summon 1 Watt monster from your deck. Just run 3 of these, you would be silly not to. It's a bit of an outdated type of floating effect, but it does a good job of summoning more copies of itself, Watt Hopper, or even a fat surprise Watt-tailed dragon. Sure, it's a shame that you either have to run it into an opponent's monster, or wait for the opponent to destroy it to get the effect off, but hey, it gives you access to your entire archetype and then then some, and seeing how we don't have much to work with so far, complaining at this point would just feel petty. Their first level 3 monster is What Mole. It's got 0 attack and 100 defense, it can attack twice during each battle phase, and if it attacks a face down defense position monster, you can destroy that monster immediately without flipping it face up or applying damage calculation. Well, it sure as hell gets rid of those sub-terrors, then again what doesn't? It was a silly counter to a bunch of decks from god knows how many years back that relied on setting a bunch of stuff and calling it a turn, but there's basically no incentive to run this nowadays, and the double attacking with 0 attack is really the cherry on top, which renders the card useless outside of applying its effect. However, doesn't the art style on this thing kinda remind anyone else of, Ice the power! Next up is What Barracks, a level 3 tuner with 300 attack and 0 defense, and when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by direct attack, discard one random card from your opponent's hand. You'd think because it's a better effect and a higher level tuner than beta, this would be worth running, at least comparatively. But the higher level What Synchro is hardly worth the effort, and while the discard effect is okay, the condition to pull it off is rarely met. Just leave this one in the water. Their other level 3 tuner is What Kiwi. Damn son, more like What Tick! It has 600 attack and 100 defense, and it prevents your What monsters from being destroyed by battle while they are attacking. There are approximately 2 monsters in the archetype that benefit from this, and while we haven't gotten to them yet, attempting to quote-unquote combo them with What Kiwi was not worth the effort 7 years ago, nor is it any more relevant today. Sure, it's a level 3 tuner, but at this point you might as well just run some more generic ones, so the only reason I can think of for running What Kiwi is because it looks funny. One of the monsters that benefit from What Kiwi is What Squirrel. It's got 700 attack and 100 defense, it can attack twice during each battle phase, and if this card battles, negate the effects of the monster it battled after damage calculation, including the ones in the graveyard. You tried. This is a perfectly fine effect, but it's put on top of a monster that can't run over a Psychroid without several equip spells. Yes, I measure the quality of a monster by whether it can or cannot run over a Psychroid. It's a bit better if you pair it up with Kiwi, but it's still really situational and totally not worth the setup. Much like the next monster, What Woodpecker. It would be easier to call it What Pecker, but I assume they figured some people would read that as Electro Deck. It's got 1000 attack, it can attack twice during each battle phase, and any monster that battles with this card cannot change its battle position. I'd say this effect is a consequence of older card design vastly overestimating the significance of changing battle positions, almost to the point where they considered it as important as effect negation, but seeing how they already have an attack-based effect negator, I'm just gonna assume What Woodpecker is a victim of the transitory period between the two eras. If I use too many big words there, I'm sorry, I meant to say it's bad. Their first level 4 is What Cobra. It's got 1000 attack and 500 defense, it can attack your opponent directly, and when it inflicts damage to your opponent by direct attack, add one What monster from your deck to your hand. Besides What Hopper, the level 4 monsters are the best thing What's have to offer. 1000 attack is not exactly a small value for a direct attacker, especially one that's able to search your entire archetype. Admittedly, it does take a while to do so and it's very easily interruptible, but simple consistency boosting is always appreciated. What Cobra is a good boy. Girl. Whatever. It's a good snake. The next level 4 is What Pheasant, as opposed to a What Patrician. It's got 1000 attack and 800 defense, it can attack directly, and when it inflicts damage by direct attack, you can target one face-up monster and banish it until the end phase of this turn. This was a pretty sick way to wipe materials from an Xyz monster during slower formats, but while there's not much practicality to it nowadays, it's still a searchable 1000 direct attacker that works well against the occasional Xyz focus deck. I just wouldn't run 3 of them. Their last main deck monster, and quite possibly the most notorious one, is What Giraffe. It's got 1200 attack and 100 defense, it can attack directly, and when it deals damage by doing so, your opponent cannot activate spells, traps or card effects until the end phase of this turn. The effect may look slow and unreliable on the surface, but if you look back at a few years ago, Giraffe was a very good way of securing all your plays in main phase 2, especially stuff like making Exidon against Burning Abyss and locking them out of their graveyard effects. Again, much like the rest of the archetype, it's been hit hard by power creep, and its disabling effect is not nearly as impressive due to how slow it is, but with 1200 direct attacking and the potential for lockouts against some weaker decks, Giraffe is definitely worth a few spots in the deck. Their first Extra deck monster is What Chimera. It's got 1400 attack and 1200 defense, requires one What tuner and one or more non-tuner Thunder type monsters, it can attack directly and when it deals damage by direct attack, place one random card from your opponent's hand on top of their deck. Chimera is essentially a way classier, much less obnoxious version of Yadagarasu, seeing how they're extremely similar in the way they can cripple the opponent, but it's locked into the archetype in a very specific way that basically forces you to run one of the subpar level 2 tuners, and I say level 2 because you won't find a relevant level 3 centric What deck deck in this plane of existence. Thankfully the other material isn't too specific, so you can synchro with things like Hunders, which are very welcome in Watts, so if you have space in your deck, filling it out with a single Watt Fox might result in the occasional Chimera. A synchro not worth paying nearly as much attention to, on the other hand, is Watt Hydra. It's a level 7 with 1500 attack and defense, it has the same summoning condition as Chimera, it can attack directly and when it deals damage that way, choose one card from your deck and banish that card. During the second standby phase after activating this effect, add that card to your hand. This thing crawled straight out of the gold sarcophagus and quite frankly, it should have probably stayed in there. An archetypal way to search any card from your deck at the cost of waiting 2 turns sounds okay, but by the time Watt managed to summon Hydra and get the effect off, the duel is probably over. If Hydra had been generic, I could easily see it being used as a tech in Shiranui and such, but not only is it not generic, its summoning requirements ensure it will never be used in anything besides the Watt deck at table 500 during a 2011 format at a rundown regionals in Romania. Their first spell card is Watt Key. It's a normal spell that enables face-up Watt monsters you control to attack directly this turn. I appreciate the sentiments, but it won't be necessary. Most of the Watts you would want to run can already attack directly, and the ones that can't don't really warrant making your deck less consistent in order to do so, unless you're playing some really obscure version of Watt Beatdown, in which case, God have mercy on your soul. Watt Scene is a continuous spell that states, when a Thunder type monster you control inflicts battle damage to your opponent, gain life points equal to the damage inflicted. I mean, you could recover a bunch of life points if you kept attacking with the level 4 trio and the synchros, but it's not gonna matter for anything when your field gets wiped and you get hit for 3 times the amount you healed yourself. Seeing how life points don't really matter in Yu-Gi-Oh! Unless they're the center focus of your deck, feel free to ignore this one. Call me an anti-Wattser, if you will. Watt Cube is an equip spell which you can equip only to a Thunder type monster. It gains 100 attack for each Thunder type monster in your graveyard. You can send this face-up card from the field to the graveyard to have one face-up Thunder type monster you control gain 1000 attack. Obviously you're never gonna rely on the first effect, seeing how the second one not only permanently increases the attack of a monster by 1000, but it's not vulnerable to MST, and not only that, but it's available to all Thunder types, as inconsistent as it can occasionally be. Frankly, I can understand running a copy of this in Watts or Batteryman, because the boost is fairly formidable, especially on direct attackers, but seeing how it doesn't help you advance your plays, it's still a questionable choice to run. Speaking of questionable choices for equip spells, Watt's Justman can only be equipped to a level 3 or lower Thunder type monster. It gains 800 attack, also its effects are negated. Each time it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, draw one card. Barring the negation, this was a decent casual option a bunch of years ago, where you could droid up a woodpecker and turn him into Parshat. It's just that nobody is gonna give a damn about an 1800 beater these days, and the level 3s are still not worth running. Don't put the gay chemicals in your Watt deck.
It is crap!
Now here comes their field spell, but oh, we're not blessed enough for this to be one of those that fix every single problem of the archetype. No, it's the middle of the Synchro era, so we get crap like Watt Castle. Any monster that attacks a Watt monster loses 1000 attack after damage calculation. The keyword being after. Not only does the opponent specifically have to be attacking in order for the effect to go off, but the attack goes through perfectly fine before the stat reduction takes place. The only relevant usage I can think of for this thing is with a face down Dragonfly, and even then, the opponent will clearly know something is going down with that face down. This isn't a castle, it's a deflating bouncy house. Their first trap is Watt Keeper, a normal trap which lets you select one level 4 or lower Watt monster in your graveyard and special summon it, but destroy it during the end phase. This is perfectly fine. The only downside is the end phase destruction, so the monster can still attack, as well as be used for Synchro, Xyz or Link material. Too many can be cloggy, but the ratios are worth experimenting with if you aim for maintaining field presence. Watt Cannon is a continuous trap that, once per turn, when a level 4 or lower Thunder type monster is normal or special summoned to the field, inflicts 600 damage to your opponent. Mass Driver this ain't. It's more akin to an ass driver really, seeing how the card is a trap, only works once per turn, and the damage is too minuscule to care about. But you know, I guess a random out-of-place burn card could be considered a charming remnant of the GX era, the kind we throw into the fire and never want to remember. The final Watt card is Watt Cancel. It's a counter trap with the following effect. When your opponent would normal or special summon a monster, discard one Watt monster, negate the summon and destroy it. Country miles better than the rest of the Watt spell and trap lineup, but Watt Cancel suffers from its cost, which sometimes makes the card dead when you would most need it. This used to be a solid option back when counter traps weren't being ran left and right, but with 3 strikes and 1 warning nowadays, there's very little reason to use it. But as usual, I have to be thankful for the TCG department for changing the artwork of the card and not traumatizing our children by subjecting them to the footage of Ojama Yellow getting what fucked. So what's up with the grades? As far as consistency goes, Dragonfly and Cobra are serviceable cards within the archetype, Thunder, Seahorse and Brohunter help from the outside, so even though it takes a while, getting to your Watts is usually not a problem. Their focus on direct attacking makes me consider giving them a yellow, but the attack values themselves are way too low in general. Their comeback ability is limited to Watt Keeper and recycling batteries, which is not too reliable. As for the protection, even though Watt Hopper is literally their only defensive maneuver, I have to give them some credit mainly due to how surprisingly powerful the lock is. As for the versatility, well, it's a Thunder deck, so it's not getting far when it comes to splashing it into other stuff, but Watts themselves have access to Synchro and Xyz plays, work well with Hunters and have a few options for build variety, so I'm gonna be generous. Here's a rough draft of a basic Watt deck, not using any Dragonflies or Hoppers and instead focusing on more modern variants of consistency boosting. Feel free to fill up the extra deck with whatever you like and build your own variant from here. Watt something something. Generic comment about power creep. Appreciation of cartoony art style. Request for a few support cards. Closing thoughts and a cheesy pun. In the end, what can be said about Watt that hasn't already been adjusted into the Watt? This is Vanilla. His name, it's a Watt rabbit, if you will, or just a regular rabbit. His name is Vanilla. I like him. That's all I wanted to say. There's no skate. Bye! Hey there everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Archetype Archive. Be sure to support my Patreon if you want to keep the channel going and maybe even commission the next archetype to be reviewed. In November I'll be streaming my first playthrough of Duelist of the Roses on Twitch as a 40,000 sub special, so be sure to check that out. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.